Please note that the presentation is being recorded for documentation and for future reference. By remaining in the session, you are consenting to be being recorded. If you have any questions, please contact the city's Industrial Pretreatment Office at 937-333-1501. As I stated before, the presentation is being recorded at this time. On behalf of the City of Dayton, I'd like to welcome you all and to thank you beforehand for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to attend this City of Dayton's PAG meeting. The topics covered in this meeting include introductions of the current staff, federal, state, and local updates, the industrial pretreatment programs updates, and additional items of note. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. The industrial pretreatment staff is composed of myself, Inez Pryor, Mark Hurlbert, Phil Boyd, and Bill Haynes. Mark, Phil, and Bill are the sewer system surveillance technicians. They're responsible for the collection of industrial sampling and monitoring to verify that all is in compliance with federal, state, and local regulations. So those are the friendly folks that you see then conducting sampling. I can address any industrial pretreatment program regulatory related topics. Chris Clark is the manager for the water reclamation facility for the City of Dayton, and Keisha Kinney is the director of water for the City of Dayton as well. If you have any questions related to the industrial pretreatment program, please don't hesitate to contact me at 937-333-1501. Let's get started on the regulatory updates on the federal front. There's a lot of activity regarding PFAS on the part of the US EPA, including CERCLA, hazardous waste substances designations for PFOA and PFOS, changes in drinking water limits, and changes in the Clean Water Act permitting. The unified agenda of regulatory and deregulatory actions list all significant regulatory and deregulatory activities planned by federal agencies, including the EPA. On September 4th, 2025, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, published the EPA Spring Unified Agenda. The U.S. EPA's Unified Agenda includes several rulemakings regarding per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. Under RCRA, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, it proposed to add 9 specific PFAS, their salts, and their structural isomers substances to the list of hazardous constituents under RCRA, requiring their consideration in waste assessments. For CERCLA, the hazardous substance listings, PFOS and PFOA will be continued to be designated as hazardous substances under CERCLA. A final rule is expected by April of 2026. Under National Primary Drinking Water Regulations, the US EPA proposes to maintain PFOA and PFOS MCLs while vacating MCLs for PFNA, PFHXS, Gen X, and the combined hard index for PFAS mixtures. For PFAS regulations and NPDES permit applications, there's a proposed rulemaking seeking to update requirements in NPDES permit applications to address monitoring and reporting of PFAS. The proposed rule is expected to be issued this month. Excuse me. Under the effluent limitations guidelines, the EPA is proposing revisions to the Organic Chemicals, Plastics, and Synthetic Fibers Effluent Limitations Guidelines, or 40 CFR Part 414, to address PFAS discharges from facilities that manufacture these chemicals. The proposed rule is expected to be issued in January of 2026. Under 40 CFR Part 432, meat and poultry products, a proposed rule that would have revised effluent limitation guidelines and established certain new pretreatment standards was withdrawn on August 28, 2025. For 40 CFR Part 469 electrical and electronic components category, there's no further action taken at this time, but the EPA will continue to monitor through the POTW influent PFAS study, which I'll discuss a little bit later during this presentation. Other effluent limitations guidelines include finalization of 40 CFR Part 423, which is a steam electric power generating effluent guidelines. Excuse me. There's no one within this jurisdiction that's regulated under this guideline, but I wanted to, since this change had been made, I wanted to include it within this presentation. Under the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA, the EPA proposes to revise the scope of the PFAS reporting rule under the TSCA. As promulgated in October 2023, the regulation requires manufacturers, including importers of PFAS in any year between 2011 and 2022, to report certain data to the EPA related to the exposure and environmental and health effects. There was a change in submission period. The submission window is now set to open April 13th, 2026 and close on October 13th, 2026. Under the Unified Agenda, which states the EPA plans to propose incorporation of certain exemptions and other modifications to the scope of the reporting rule. The proposed revision is expected to be issued by the end of 2025, and a final rule is expected in June of 2026. Under Toxics Release Inventory Expansion, TRI, the EPA is developing a final rule to add individual PFAS compounds and categories to the TRI list under the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act and the Pollution Prevention Act. Excuse me. Under the Methods Update Rule 22, the EPA signed a new proposed Methods Update Rule, MUR 22, on December 6, 2024. The action proposes to promulgate 3 new EPA methods into 40 CFR Part 136. The first EPA method would be EPA Method 1621, which is the analytical method capable of measuring adsorbable organic fluorine, or AOF. Second would be the EPA Method 1633A, which is the analytical method capable of measuring 40 PFAS compounds. The method was a result of a collaborative effort between the EPA and the Department of Defense. And also an EPA Method 1628, which is a method designed to detect all 209 PCB congeners, and it's more sensitive than the current method 608.3, which only targets 7 common air chlor mixtures. The method takes into account the environmental transformation of PCBs and their non-air chlor sources, and there's an anticipation of finalization very soon. Related to this is the withdrawal of the 7 air chlor PCB mixtures parameters. Due to the current method, EPA 608.3, due to its inability to accurately analyze all 209 congeners in PCB, its replacement with EPA 1628 will improve the accuracy, sensitivity of PCB analysis. This is expected to have no changes on permits and will result in the ultimate phase out of air chlor procedures. The MOR also proposed to simplify the sampling requirements for 2 volatile organic compounds, acrolein and acrylonitrile. The current method requires a preservation down to a pH of 4 to 5. The simplification of the sampling requirements with a change to this pH adjustment will eliminate the need for separate protocols for these two compounds versus the other volatile compounds analyzed under the method EPA 624.1. More information on the methods updates rules can be found on the EPA website, www.epa.gov/CWA methods /methods updates rules. Under the draft sewage sludge risk assessment conducted under section 405D of the Clean Water Act, the sewage sludge risk assessment may lead to updates in EPA's Part 503 regulations, which govern the use and disposal of sewage sludge. The EPA released a draft risk assessment for PFAS chemicals in sewage sludge in January 2025. The findings suggest that current biosolids practices may need to be revised to address PFAS. The draft assessment will inform the EPA's decision-making under the Clean Water Act, Section 405D, regarding whether to regulate PFAS in sewage sludge. Comments were accepted until August 2025. Related to this would be, there was a lawsuit to force the EPA to issue limits on PFAS and biosolids that was dismissed in September 2025. Other federal regulatory updates include the EPA's Integrated Risk Information System, IRIS, which provides a comprehensive toxicity assessment for environmental chemicals to support regulatory decisions. The assessments characterize potential health risk for long-term exposure and are used by federal, state, and other agencies to set regulatory limits and to guide risk management decisions. While it doesn't set regulatory limits directly, its toxicity values are used to inform pollutant screening for industrial discharges, support development of local limits for specific chemicals, and guide updates to categorical pretreatment standards. IRIS assessments that took place in 25 include inorganic arsenic, PFHXS, and formaldehyde. IRIS assessments which are in development include chloroform, PFNA, uranium, and nitrite. Moving on to regulatory updates on the state level. Starting off with amendments to the cessation of regulated operations rule amendments. The Ohio EPA proposed revisions to Chapter 3745-352 of the Administrative Code to align with federal standards, streamline compliance protocols, and security measures for facilities ceasing operation and removal of redundant rules. The updates include clarification of contamination with definition and conditions under which equipment is considered contaminated with a regulated substance, removal of the frequently asked questions structure, and applicability of the regulation to owners and operators, and updates to the process for requesting a waiver from compliance requirements when temporarily discontinuing regulated operations. The Ohio EPA has not had a specific rule change finalized this year concerning PFAS, but federal changes may have an influence on state actions. Since the U.S. EPA has updated its PFAS regulatory framework, the Ohio EPA is expected to incorporate the federal updates into its pretreatment oversight for future enforcement and monitoring requirements. Industrial facilities discharging PFAS may have additional regulations, including required sampling and reporting, potential updates to discharge permits, and stricter local limits set by the city. In 2024, the Ohio EPA conducted a PFAS sampling event in cooperation with the city. It was to learn more about industrial contributors of potential industrial contributors of these pollutants to the city's POTW. Each participating industry should have received analytical results from that effort last year from the Ohio EPA. Moving on to updates to the city's industrial pretreatment program specifically. Sewer use ordinance updates. The city last updated its sewer use ordinance in 2008. While it's been effective in serving the city's needs, we are committed to making changes to align with more current regulatory and technological advances. In moving forward with this effort, it was deemed necessary to update the sewer use ordinance in order to include several changes in order to improve the effectiveness of the city's industrial pretreatment program. Changes to the sewer use ordinance include, but are not limited to, wording and definition updates to align with 40 CFR 403 and Ohio Administrative Code 3745 and Ohio Revised Code 6111 rules and regulations. Changes include notification procedures. There was an addition of industrial users requirements for the immediate notification for facility changes that have the potential for slug discharge. There's changes in wording and definitions to align, as stated before. There was a change in local limits and best management practices definitions. There was the addition of electronic submittal of reports to the city language in the sewer use ordinance. And there was a clarification of the definition and use of general permits. Oops, going way back. Excuse me. So where's the city at in the process of approval and implementation? I'll kind of give a bit of a background. The Ohio EPA had an initial review in May of this year. The Ohio City Commission approved the changes in August of 2025. We submitted these changes to the Ohio EPA in September of 2025. There was a 45-day comment period by the EPA that ended on October 18th, 2025. And there was a final EPA approval that was issued October 2020 or October 22nd or 2025. So that leaves ordinance adoption and implementation by the city. So what does this mean for industries? There will be a final notification to industrial users when it's going to be the final date for implementation. There will be updates to permits, reports, and procedures to reflect this new sewer use ordinance. Immediate changes that you will see will be modifications to the industrial wastewater discharge permits to include the requirement for immediate notification to the city if there's any changes at its facility that have the potential for spills, accidental discharges, or slug loads. Other changes may include modifications to data submittal updates, modifications to the PRCC, the paper copy, and electronic data submittal of periodic report on continued compliance. There'll be language changes in the there'll be language changes in the permits to reflect that once that's up and rolling. During last year's PAG meeting, I mentioned the Effluent Guidelines Program, Plan 15, which focused on evaluating the extent and nature of PFAS discharges. One item noted was the US EPA's POTW influence study that was to take place. For background, the study involved a nationwide data collection on industrial discharges of PFAS to publicly owned treatment works. Its purpose was to verify potential sources of PFAS wastewater and to help POTWs assess the need for control measures at the source. The influent PFAS study initially required approximately 400 POTWs with the highest daily flow rates to complete a mandatory questionnaire to determine PFAS plant-specific information on industrial users discharged into the plant. Approximately 200 to 300 POTWs were selected to collect samples of domestic wastewater influent, the POTW influent, the effluent at the POTW, and industrial users wastewater effluent. The samples were to be analyzed for both PFAS and AOF. The City of Dayton has been included in this subset of POTWs. To comply with this, regulated industries and potential contributors discharging to the main trunk lines in the sanitary sewer collection system were selected to have samples collected at the facilities. To fulfill the monitoring required, the city is conducting 3 separate monitoring events. We've completed the first of the 3 separate monitoring events for PFAS in October of 2025. The results for this first round have been sent to participating industries via certified mail. If you've not received the report, please contact the Industrial Pretreatment Office. You can email me at inez.pryor@daytonohio.gov, or you can phone the office at 937-333-1501. I mentioned previously the electronic data submittal to the city as part of the change to the sewer use ordinance, but I wanted to discuss its status. During our last meeting, we discussed the inclusion of electronic data submittal of required reports to the city. Currently, the work to achieve this is ongoing. We've updated the pretreatment information software system, which will allow the electronic data submittal of the PRCCs to the city. However, this requires US EPA and OEPA approval of the program as being a cross-media electronic reporting rule compliant program, or CROMER compliant. Finalization is anticipated to be completed in 2026. More information will be made available to significant industrial users at a future date as we move further along in the process. The city currently sends required reports, permits, and information via certified mail to industries. When you receive any correspondence from the city by certified mail, please be sure to print, sign, and date the card that goes back to the city. This information is very important for tracking purposes for our program. Please be sure that there's a person who can sign for the correspondence, or an area that someone can sign for the correspondence as it's left off by the post office representative. If the post office does not have a person to sign, or if the office is closed, they will leave a notification card if letters cannot be dropped off. So please check with them as soon as possible to pick up certified mail. Another topic of interest of this presentation are authorized representatives and signatory requirements. Per 40 CFR 403.12 and the city's current and future sewer use ordinance, an authorized representative is defined as one of the following: the president, secretary, treasurer, vice president of the corporation who's in charge of principal business functions, or someone who performs a similar policy or decision-making function. Can be a manager of manufacturing, production, or operation facilities who's authorized to make management decisions that govern the operation of the facility and is responsible for ensuring that the necessary systems are established or necessary actions are taken to gather complete and accurate information for control mechanism requirements, and has the authority to sign documents and has been assigned or delegated to the manager in accordance with corporate procedures. It can be a sole proprietorship, partnership, general partner, or proprietor. Or if it's a federal, state, or local government facility, can be a director or the highest official appointed or designated to oversee the operation and performance of activities of the facility. Any one of those that I mentioned previously can designate another authorized representative as a duly authorized representative if the authorization is in writing. The authorization specifies the individual or position responsible for the overall operation of the facility from which the discharge originates or having overall responsibility for environmental matters for the company. And they must be authorized through a signed statement letter provided to the City of Dayton, to the Industrial Pretreatment Office specifically. If you would like to designate someone as an authorized representative, please submit this written request to the city. The submittal must be received and accepted by the city prior to the submittal of reports. If a written authorization is no longer accurate because there's a different individual or a different position has responsibility for the overall operation of the facility or overall responsibility for environmental matters for the company, a new authorization satisfying the above requirements must be submitted to the city prior to or together with any reports to be signed by an authorized representative. Or under signatory requirements of an authorized representative, please sign in ink, either black or blue ink. The submitted reports are legal documents and require clear and permanent signatures to ensure authenticity and enforceability. Other colors are not easily readable and they tend to fade, especially when copied or scanned or just kind of with age. They're hard to read. Under general information, the city does have a separate water website page, www.daytonohio.gov/363-water. If you go in there and you type industrial pretreatment program, you can access general information about the industrial pretreatment program itself, extra strength wastewater surcharge programs, various presentations and meetings related to the program, the current local limits, the current sewer use ordinance, and enforcement, the enforcement response plan, and some additional training related to completion of monthly reports. So now I will open this up to questions if you have any questions. If you don't have a microphone, please type your question using the chat feature. Well, I don't have any questions as of this time. I'll give it a couple more minutes. Okay. Well, I just wanted to thank you for attending this meeting, the presentation. I know it's, everyone's schedules are very busy, so I truly appreciate you attending the meeting at this time. If you have any questions about the city's industrial pretreatment program, please, again, don't hesitate to contact the industrial pretreatment office at 937-333-1501, or me specifically at 937-333-1863, or you can email me at inez.pryor@daytonohio.gov. And again, please don't forget to fill out the sign-in sheet that's available on the chat feature. And I just wanted to state again that everyone will receive a copy of this recorded presentation via email within the next couple of days. So thank you again for attending. Again, please don't hesitate if you have any questions. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Inez.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Inez.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.